as we're collectively becoming more aware of racism and racial inequalities and social injustices in our world, I wanted to share a little bit about what I have been learning over the past years, and in particular right now as it relates to listening. However, I will say that I am still learning. I can never truly know and understand someone else's experience. And as it relates to my participation or impact in our collective and our collective consciousness, and as well in our social systems that are unjust and unfair, that work is never done. And as well, the stories that I share may not be mappable onto every situation, of course, but they are where I have learned some of my lessons in listening. It was a number of years ago, and a friend of mine invited me to participate in an initiative around education or the educational system and racial inequality. And this led us as a team to be invited to participate in a workshop at a large conference. And my friend who was spearheading the whole thing, who's Black, he knew that I was having some very powerful, deep, impactful conversations with my Black friends at that time about their experiences of being Black in our country. And he said, I think that you should lead the part of our workshop around our conversations about racism and racial injustice. And I said, yeah, I'm feeling called to do that. I really want to, so yes. He said, okay, great. Well, I'm going to make a suggestion first, which is that you reach out to this woman that I know. She's very powerful. She's a leader in the community. She's Black. She's led workshops of this kind in nature before, and I think she'd be a great resource for you. So I said, okay, yeah, I'll do that. And I did. And the conversation that I had with her left a very profound and powerful mark on me and shifted a lot of things for me around being white, around my conversations, around listening, and even in my personal relationships. So thank you, Lolita, for your honesty. I was sharing with her what I wanted to do in the workshop, and she said, Aria, can I be honest with you? And I said, yes, please. She said, I wouldn't want to participate in your workshop. In fact, I have no intention of doing so. And I said, would you mind sharing why? And she said, yeah, sure. It's because I've participated in workshops like this before. And let me tell you what happens every single time. Each time, the Black individuals in the room start to share and speak about their experience. But the white people cannot hear it. They can't listen. And so what begins to happen is that the Black people start to get louder and louder and louder until they are actually screaming or yelling. And still, the white people cannot hear what's being said. This nugget was one of a number of them that she gave to me in this call. And this one in particular, I had to digest a bit. And it was a couple of weeks later that I was on a group call for our workshop, a conference call. And I was very connected to the conversations I'd been having with my friends and the importance, not just the value, but the pivotal importance that we get to break through our limitations and having these conversations and begin to open that up for the people in the workshop. And I was being met with some significant resistance on the call, and by actually the white people, and in particular by this one gentleman. And I noticed that I started to get louder, and then a little louder, and then louder, until I was completely flustered, and I was on the very edge of completely losing my cool. And we ended the call, and I was embarrassed. But I then started to laugh because I realized that what had happened to me was exactly what Lolita had described. And I got it. So I decided to reach out to this gentleman a couple of days later and This time, however, I took a different tack. This time, even though I was committed to what I felt very powerfully was meant to happen in the workshop and what would make the biggest difference, I didn't share my point of view. I just let him speak. And he talked for quite some time. And I just listened openly, with compassion, to everything he had to say. And when he was done, and there was nothing more for him to say, there was something available in the space between us. And I said, "Do you trust me?" He said, "Yes, I do." I said, "Let me lead this workshop the way I'm feeling called. And I promise I will take care of every single person in that room. And it will be powerful and impactful." And there was a pause. And he said, "I'm scared, Arya. I'm just scared." I said, "Thank you for saying that. I get it." And then he paused again and he said, "Okay, go ahead and do what you feel you need to do. I leave it in your hands." And it was a very powerful workshop that we all led together, and people came up to us afterwards and told us so. When we're listening, we are truly listening with intentionality. We give people the space to just, first of all, be. We give and allow space for something to move, even potentially. And when we're listening, we are not speaking, we're not talking. We're also not arguing, that's probably evident, but worth saying. When we're listening, however, we're also not being defensive, but we're also not feeling defensive. Defensiveness is resistance. It's like the anti-listening. And when we're listening, we're also often not doing a whole lot of thinking. I mean, maybe some, of course, especially to know what next question to ask, but not a lot of thinking. When I was in these conversations, really actually more listening sessions with my friends, afterwards they shared things with me, such as, "This was nothing like I expected it to be," and "This was healing." And that's what happens when we're listening to anyone about anything, deeply listening, is that there can be a healing that is allowed for. But as well, and very important right now in this time, in any time, but especially right now, is that listening can change something for us as well as the listener. And that's pivotally important because that's where the transformation can also occur for ourselves and for our group collective consciousness and culture and society. And as well in our personal relationships, certainly. And when we're really listening, what is happening is we are allowing it to be received, so to speak, in our center. Some people might experience it as their heart, but it's really in the center of our body, in our core, and to really get it there, to receive it there. And when we do that, what's being said can begin to change us. What's being said by the other person can change us. Certainly it can open up our perspective, our mindset, our awareness, but it can also, from a place of deep compassion, have us begin to understand something or see something or learn something that we had previously not understood before. Recently, I've been doing more listening with my Indigenous friends. That's First Nations friends. And there are things that I completely didn't know that I didn't know until I started to get curious and until I started to actually inquire and interact. And these things begin to make us be more of something, richer, but then as well aware of how we are participating in the world in a way that might be blind, or might be even that we're participating in something that is not of benefit for another, or harmful even. So when we are truly listening, we are then empowered with the responsibility to behave differently, to interact with ourselves, to heal our own consciousness and the way we are, but as well, it can open up a conversation for what's next. What's the right next action? Where do we go from here? And at the very least, if even that's in a personal relationship, a conversation in a personal relationship, we are left able with the empowered action to decide together where to go next. That would be of benefit for all of us. So listening is healing, and it's transformative for the speaker and the listener and for the group.